I invite Dr. Habib Hussein for 30 minutes, I think. First for 30 minutes and then for another. Please, Professor.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Dan. So please confirm if you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, great. So it's kind of very important session. Before I go into this session, I would like to introduce myself briefly. So my name is Abid Hussain. By academic training, I am economist. Have been working in mountain environments, mountain regions for last 17 years. So served in different roles. At the moment, for last 9 years, actually, I have been working with International Center for Integrated Mountain Development. This center has secretariat in Nepal. We work in 8 countries, wherever Hindu Kush Himalayan mountain ranges actually exist: Afghanistan, Pakistan, China, Nepal, Bhutan, India, Myanmar, and Bangladesh. 8 countries. So it's very important session on micro enterprises, and I will try to highlight the importance of micro enterprises for mountain economy. I will also give little bit background of mountain economy, why it's different from national economies or plain economies. Let's start. So first of all, let's try to understand the concept of micro enterprise. Whenever some business or economic activity is started at very micro scale, that activity may take into account to produce tangible goods or may render services. Mostly in economics, we always define products into categories: goods and services. Goods are mostly tangible and services are not tangible, non-tangible thing which we render to people to serve them. So micro enterprises are very small scale, very micro level businesses or economic activities which focus on both manufactured goods or services. And it starts with very small capital investment and implies very less number of employees. So to further understand that, mostly it's thought in literature or you can see in books and all that, that micro enterprise is always linked with microfinance or microcredit. Okay, micro enterprise cannot be run without finance. It may be linked with microfinance or microcredit or not. It's not necessary that always microcredit or microfinance is required for micro enterprises. The entrepreneurs may invest by themselves also. If they have enough capital, they can invest with and run the micro enterprises without any support from credit or finance. Let's try to understand much more. So mostly three criteria are used to define enterprises. How these enterprises are categorized into micro enterprises or small enterprises or medium enterprises or larger enterprises. So main focus of this presentation is micro enterprise. If investment does not cross $34,000, it's an example from India. So first of all, in our region, particularly in Hindu Kush Himalayan region and several other regions also, particularly in developing country, mostly investment is the criteria. How much investment we are going to make in business, and based on investment, it's defined as whether it falls under micro enterprise category, small, medium, or large. I've just put one example from India that if any business or economic activity started with the investment of $34,000 and it does not cross that limit, it may be below that ceiling. So that will be categorized as micro enterprise. So another example of criteria of turnover. Turnover mean maybe if somebody has any background in accounting, so there are debit and credit entries. So all the entries in 1 year, for example, all debit entries and credit entries are added to get his added amount, overall amount as sum. So we will call it debit turnover and credit turnover. If credit turnover of any business or small scale business is less than 0.68 million USD, it may also be categorized as micro enterprise. These two criteria, both examples are taken from India. So definition of investment ceiling or the criteria of turnover may differ from one country to another country, because I belong to this region, have much more you can say expertise on this region, so that's why I put examples from this region. So in terms of employees also, if employees are up to 10, if any business, small activity, employ 10 or less number of employees, it may be categorized as micro enterprise. Beyond 10, it will fall under small enterprise or medium enterprise or larger enterprise based on the number of employees. So some of the countries, they apply all these three criteria to categorize the businesses into categories, whether they are micro, small, and medium. Some countries adopt combination of one, two or two. Some they adopt only the single criteria. It depends on the region, country, and priorities of governments. Let's see the types of micro enterprises. So as I mentioned in terms of economics, so we can categorize into two categories: manufacturing, if tangible products are manufactured. For example, food vendors or non-food vendors, shopkeepers, micro businesses in agriculture are informal sellers. Informal sellers are also small vegetable sellers, fruit sellers, or small scale tangible products are being sold by those sellers. All those will come under the goods category. If they are selling some tangible goods, it means that fall in the manufacturing category of micro. We will call this enterprise is manufacturing enterprise. If some enterprises, for example, particularly in mountain areas, small business point, they are only providing guidance to tourism. We can say that they are providing tourist guides who guide tourists on tourism activities. Those type of activities which don't produce any tangible good, but they are rendering services. Those type of enterprises will be clubbed under the category of service rendering enterprises. If we take into account environment, so we can categorize into two categories. First one is conventional micro enterprises. So most of the enterprises in mountain areas, even in other areas, plain areas and all that, are conventional micro enterprise. Environment is not the center or focus of enterprise. Business or economics is the center of enterprises. If environment is taken into account, and environment is one of the key features, some enterprises also take into account social aspects. So we can call those enterprises also environment friendly or sustainable enterprises. If enterprise take into account environment together with economic returns, then that enterprise can be called as green micro enterprise or clean enterprise or environmental friendly enterprise. If within environment only focus is climate change, we can say climate smart enterprise. Different terms are being used. Mostly in recent times, green micro enterprises, the term being used quite frequently in literature. So key feature of green micro enterprises are organic inputs. Mostly those inputs are used in manufacturing, which are very organic. Chemical or inorganic inputs or machineries are not used, which add to the emissions. Then environment friendly packing. The packing material is also environment friendly and nature positive. Then organic and safe products. For example, organic food production. If some company or some farmer enterprise, they are growing organically, they are packing that food products in organic material and they are supplying using environment friendly transportation. or they are using clean energy. We can call those organic and safe products. Avoiding any harmful waste. Waste is bigger problem in mountain areas. That's why waste is also very important to take into account green micro enterprises, how waste is being managed. Then nature promoting, nature positive are aligned with environmental policies. If especially related to environment policies, all countries have NDCs, nationally determined contributions. All countries, they have agreed to reduce the emissions. So a lot of countries, especially in our region, they have their own policies and guiding documents to reduce the emissions. So especially if green micro enterprises, they're aligned with environment policy, this is a big plus point for micro enterprises to qualify as green micro enterprises. Let's try to understand the nature of mountain economy. In mountain areas, whatever the development, infrastructure, and investment being done, still the mountain economy is heavily depending on natural resources. If we talk about natural resources, agriculture remains the mainstay, and agriculture, we all know, depend on natural resources. Pasture and rangelands are also very important natural resource, especially important for livestock-based livelihoods, our economy and pastoralists. Then forest and glaciers. Would like to one example from Western Himalayas, Afghanistan, parts of Pakistan. Glaciers are lifeline of agriculture and economy, mountain economy. 95% agriculture and economy, mountain economy are dependent on glacier-fed irrigation systems. Those traditional irrigation systems are called cools. So in short, mountain economy and livelihoods are heavily dependent, still heavily dependent on natural resources. Then mountain ecosystems are highly vulnerable to climatic and non-climatic shocks and changes. This is one of the key features. If we compare to plain areas or national economies, they, for example, plain areas, some of the hazard we can predict, we have early warning systems. We can have enough time to prepare, but in mountains, flash floods, gloves, earthquakes, very little time we have to respond to these shocks and overall changes, for example, demographic changes and climatic changes. And mountain areas remain highly vulnerable to these type of shocks. Niche products, this is one of the key difference between the mountain economy and non-mountain economy. In mountains, production scale is very small. In niche valleys, pockets, small scale production is being done, particularly in agriculture. The scale of production is very less. And for farmers, it's very difficult to achieve the economies of scale. For example, transportation, they are growing in on small scale, and transportation costs are very high. Then varying agroecological condition in mountains, it's one of the key feature. For example, if one area, X area we consider in mountains, we cannot generalize any of the data for whole of that area, even but within one region. If we consider one region, in that particular region, from one valley to another valley, conditions will drastically change in terms of agroecology, because conditions depend on the nature of mountains, the vegetation on mountains, slope of mountains, aspects of mountain. Aspect mean the direction of mountain. It's towards the sun side, or settlements are living on other side. The exposure of sun is very less. All these conditions depend on the nature of that particular area in mountains. So any survey, any information from any region of the mountain areas, so we cannot generalize. It's very difficult to generalize. That's why in mountains, very specific situation analysis are required to assess. Then varying access to institutional services, it depends on topography and connectivity. Market hubs, collection centers, extension services, or other associated networks like mobile services and all that. It all varies from one valley to other valley, even within one mountain range, particularly in developing countries. So we cannot take it as a kind of a blanket approach to consider for mountains. So inadequate skilled labor force in mountain areas, particularly in developing countries, from mountain areas out migration rate is very high, especially youth, male youth, they are out migrating to other areas for socioeconomic aspirations, or maybe because of climate change. On climate change, we have very limited evidences that uh, climate change is inducing out migration. There are evidences, published evidences on displacement or a kind of a temporary migration. So, but most of the cases are showing that migration is actually driven by socioeconomic aspiration. Out migration is rate is very high, especially youth. And because of youth out migration, and mostly old population is staying in mountain areas, or women are staying in mountain areas, they don't have that advanced skills old population to adopt the technological advancement in economy. This is one of the constraints. Then emerging non-agriculture opportunities. Agriculture still remains mainstay of mountain economy in almost all developing regions, mountain regions of the world. But there is shift. It's going on. It's a rapid shift. We don't know about the scenario in the coming years. Now there is shift from agriculture to non-agriculture income sources like tourism, handicrafts, and others. Now, another thing very important, diversity in agriculture, even in non-agriculture production is declining in mountain areas. This is overall scenario situation in mountain areas, economy. Out of those points I presented in last slide, only one point I have picked, how climate change is impacting mountain economy. We can see from Hindu Kush Himalayan region, several studies done by our center. So I have just put the narrative based statement based on those studies, avoiding the statistics. So climate change is resulting or influencing mountain economies and livelihoods through these factors: reduced crop productivity and agriculture income, then dependency on external food items and non-food items is gradually increasing. Now, mountain areas may be, for example, income is less or more, independent of income. Some people are poor and some people are richer in mountain. I'm just giving an example. If dependence on external food and non-food items is high, even people are richer in mountain areas, it will not qualify that mountain area to be food secure. That mountain area will remain vulnerable to food insecurity. Because in mountain areas, climatic hazard and natural hazards may induce landslides, may result in broken bridges, road connectivity can be destroyed. In that case, even people have income, but food supplies from other areas will be disconnected, and they may not have physical and economic access to, even they have economic access, they will not have physical access to food. So it will push them in transitory food insecurity. So that's why dependence on external food items is not considered good in economic assessments of any mountain area. In mountain areas, there is rise in food price because of climate-induced hazards, particularly floods and drought. During that period, food prices rise rapidly. It also has impact on the health, food intake of mountain areas. Then increase indebtedness. In case of climate change, if crops are ruined, damaged, infrastructure is broken, livestock is eroded, mostly households who borrowed from some formal and informal sources, they face long-term indebtedness because they cannot return loan to those sources. All of the things are damaged. They don't have adequate access to other financial services like insurance. Those type of risks are not covered, then they will be facing long-term indebtedness. Then in mountain areas, very important to understand women's vulnerability also. In the case of climate change induced hazards, taking into account that point which I presented in last slide, that out migration rate of youth is very high, particularly active male members. In that case, most of the workload is on women. If women are handling household and agricultural or economic activities together, if some hazard happens, that push those women's and that household particularly into extreme vulnerability. So land abandonment rate is also very high in mountain areas because of out migration of economically active out migration, and climate change has triggered this land abandonment in mountain areas. One of the factors. Loss and damages, we all know that if there is hazard, for example, luck or flood, it will have huge impact on the infrastructure of that area. So let's try to understand why micro enterprises are appropriate for mountain economy. I mentioned that in mountain areas, production or products are niche, very small scale. Transportation costs are very high. We can say overall transaction costs are very high. For example, if farmer is producing very small amount of any product, it will be very difficult for that farmer to transport that product to market and even to plain areas because of high transportation cost, because transportation cost is mostly higher than the cost or higher than the value of that product. One option, if farmers they are doing collective activities, there are several factors which are impacting collective activities of farmers also. But why micro enterprises are important? Micro enterprises will eliminate or reduce those transportation or transaction costs, because if micro enterprises are established in same areas very close to production zones, that will reduce the transportation and transaction cost for producers. If farmers are doing collective activities and they are supplying raw material to very close by established processing units, it will ultimately result in the enhanced income for farmers or non-farming producers. That's why in the case of niche production, always local micro enterprises are very important and very suitable for mountain areas. Then constrained availability of financial capital for investment. In mostly mountain areas, farmers and non-farmer producers, they have very small scale production, they don't have that much income and savings. Overall, we can say they have constrained financial capital availability, and it's difficult for them to invest in businesses. That's why micro enterprise establishment in that area is very important. That micro enterprise may be established by that farmer. If that farmer does not have capital enough or adequate capital to establish, maybe group of farmers can establish, or some institutions they can establish, and it will benefit local producers. Limited labor force in micro enterprise, we require only less number of employees, as we saw in our definition. In mountain areas, also I presented that out migration of skilled or young people is very high. So micro enterprises require less labor force. So if micro enterprises are established in mountain areas, so there are less chances of labor shortage because less number of people are required. It does not require so many people. It fits or suits the situation in mountain areas. Then need value addition. Mountain niche products, of course, require value addition. Wherever raw products are being produced and raw products are sold, it does not actually transform the situation of those systems. Always those areas, they transform into productive systems which have value addition. So it's important to convert raw products of mountain areas into value-added products and to establish value chains. So that's a micro enterprises can play very important role in this aspect. Then organic production, mostly organic production was the feature of mountain production systems, agriculture or non-agriculture. With the passage of time now, inorganic production is replacing organic production. To revive organic production, it's important to establish micro enterprises, particularly clean and green micro enterprises, to revamp or revive organic production in mountain areas. Then potential use of remittances, as I mentioned, out migration rate is very high in mountain areas. So the use of remittances is very important. People who out migrated, they remit money to their families, and those money are particularly invested in fixed assets like land, house, or purchasing properties in urban centers. So it's important to mobilize the local people to invest some part of remittances in value addition. These remittances can be used as available or operational financial capital. And part of remittances, if used in value chains or local businesses or local micro enterprises, it can be instrumental factor to transform mountain economies. Then vast scope of micro business in non-farm sector. For example, tourism is very emerging: embroidery, wood carvings, handicraft, jewels, Yasa Gumba, caterpillar fungus, we call that. These are emerging opportunities, particularly in our region, Hindu Kush Himalayan region. A lot of scope to invest in these emerging non-agricultural income opportunities, and micro enterprises can be established around these opportunities. Then potential to engage youth and women. As I mentioned, women are facing a lot of workload in mountain areas. Youth is out migrating. We cannot stop youth from out migrating to other areas. Of course, socio-economic aspirations are very dominant. Everybody wants to improve their socio-economic condition. If alternative opportunities are available compared to local opportunities in mountain areas, of course, everybody will make rational decision to out migrate to other area to grab the alternative opportunity with higher economic return. So it's better to provide incentives or establish micro enterprise. In even micro enterprises also, policy incentives are very important through financial services, technical support, or enabling environment through policies. It will not only engage youth, it will reduce the pace of out migration. It will not fully control out migration. It will at least reduce the pace of out migration, and it will also reduce the laborious workload of women. If women are involved in business activities, more managerial role, business management role, rather than doing laborious activities in fields and all that. So micro enterprises can play a very important role to reduce the workload of women. Then potential of micro enterprises in mountains. So two, three things are very important to understand in this context.
Please,
Number one, hello.
3 to 5 minutes.
Okay, I will try to write. One, triggering economic activities. In previous slide, appropriateness, we understood that why micro enterprises are appropriate or suitable for mountain economy, because opportunities are existing. We discussed those opportunities. Here, what can be done to boost micro enterprises in mountain areas, and what micro enterprises can do for mountain economy? Number one, triggering economic activities. Of course, it will generate economic opportunities. It will create employment opportunities, and using available limited financial resources, whatever financial resources are available, because micro enterprises require less investment if collecting investment is done. So those resources can be used efficiently, particularly tapping the labor force in several areas. After this pandemic, out migrants, they return to their areas of native areas. So they are facing layoffs. Layoffs mean partial or full unemployment. So that labor force may also be used. And mountain areas may also be mainstreamed in policies through micro enterprises. If micro enterprises are successful, piloting is successful, small scale experiments are successful, policymakers will realize that mountains and micro enterprises can play a very important role in national and regional economy. Of course, these micro enterprises and mountain economy will be mainstreamed in national economies. Of course, very important role micro enterprises can play to reduce poverty, food insecurity, and economic vulnerability of mountain communities. And it can also make significant contribution to national economies. Several countries, I would like to give one example from Pakistan. 54% area is mountain area, and mainly plain areas are contributing to national economy. If local opportunities in mountain areas are tapped, so mountains will also be able to contribute significantly to national economies. For policies, it's important to understand the mountain context. Mostly policy instruments are generic. They do not take into account mountain areas and mountain specificities. It's important to inform policies. It's important to understand the context of mountains. As I mentioned, potential and challenges vary within mountain areas. And another thing, mountain specific data and data on economic development indicators are also very scarce in mountain areas. Some mechanism and frameworks are required to understand. Then assessing tapping the comparative and competitive advantage of mountain areas is also very important. Mountain products, very important point, may not be having comparative advantage because of several reasons. Input supply to mountain areas have high transportation costs, may be expensive compared to the same products available in plain areas. So in terms of price and cost, mountain products may not have comparative advantage, but they may have competitive advantage. For example, as I mentioned, organic products, if come even expensive to market, so consumers would like to prefer those products. It's important to identify the competitive advantage in all sectors and subsectors to promote mountain products, branding, and establishing micro enterprises around those things. Thank you very much. So any questions related to this lecture, I will be happy to respond in Google group. So maybe we can take one or